This is Public Occurrences, both foreign and domestic. And now your host, Michael O'Fallon.
We are being transitioned from an analog, objectively true, scientific method-ruled world where laws and liberties are paramount, and into a subjective, digital, fallacious alchemical world where transformational goals and authoritarianism are paramount. At the same time, you are being transitioned from an economy of abundance to an economy of scarcity. Now, I have been opening my show for several years by repeating these same lines, and as I have said many times, to understand what will be happening next, you must understand the causes of things. There has been quite a bit of noise created over the last few weeks regarding the Jeffrey Epstein flight lists and client list that were now being shared with the media. And what you need to realize is that the public sharing of these lists is really just a limited hangout. Now, let me explain in simple terms what a limited hangout is. According to Victor Marchetti, a former special assistant to the deputy director of the Central Intelligence Agency, a limited hangout is, quote, spy jargon for a favorite and frequently used gimmick of the clandestine professionals. When their veil of secrecy is shredded and they can no longer rely on a phony cover story to misinform the public, they resort to admitting, sometimes volunteering, some of the truth while still managing to withhold the key and damaging facts in the case. The public, however, is usually so intrigued by the new information that it never thinks to pursue the matter any further. End quote. Another definition about a limited hangout and what a limited hangout is from Rational Wiki, and it's this, quote, limited hangout is an intelligence jargon for a form of propaganda in which a selected portion of a scandal, criminal act, sensitive or classified information is revealed or leaked without telling the whole story. The intention may be to establish credibility as a critic of something or somebody by engaging in criticism of them while in fact covering up for them by omitting many details, to distance oneself publicly from something using innocuous or vague criticism, even when one's own sympathies are privately with them, or to divert public attention away from a more heinous act by leaking information about something less heinous. While used by the CIA and other intelligence organizations, the tactic of limited hangout has become popularized in the corporate and political spheres, end quote. So the strategy is basically when enough public knowledge is coming out about a major critical event, what crime has been committed or actual conspiracy against the general public, and there is the beginning of both investigations as well as acknowledgement that something really bad or really, really wrong has happened. Then you give the public a bone, just like you give a dog a bone. But a bone with no meat on it. And just like the dog that will be satisfied and spend hours and hours chewing away on the meatless bone that you gave him, I mean, he will even chase that bone. So too will the general public on social media, if you give them a meatless bone. Because if you just give the public enough so that they will say, aha, I knew it all along. A former president was guilty of having all sorts of fun with young girls. Or, aha, I knew it all along. The FBI and DOJ were working to suppress true stories of crimes and suppress the deplatformed millions of people on Twitter. Well, you give the public a bone and let them chatter away about it for months and months, even making memes about how bad the violations of your First Amendment rights were, writing songs about how politicians were violating children on some island somewhere, Well, if you give the public that bone, and you don't suppress the tidbits of information that you give the public, then the story will run its course. And while the celebrity or politician might be excoriated by their opponents on the right, nothing will happen to them. Nada. Nothing. And they just go on doing whatever they want to do. Think about this for a moment. How many men and women have spent any time in prison for the horror of the faux public health crisis in 2020? And how about how many leaders have been kicked out of churches and seminaries for infusing Marxism and kooky globalist environmentalism into the gospel and into evangelicalism over the past 20 years? How many? How many men and women who are on the client and fly list of Jeffrey Epstein have been prosecuted? How many? And this was all blackmail, and everyone knows it. And the intelligence agencies, the mainstream media, the politicians, and the Department of Justice think that if they just give you that little bit of evidence, that hanging out of a peek behind the curtain, and allow you to rant about it on Twitter for a while, well, then you'll feel satisfied. Because they gave you, the dog, the public, a bone. And the public will spend months being satisfied with their aha moment. A limited, very limited hangout, and nothing will happen to change anything. By the way, who was the one that has had that Epstein client list for years? Well, it is Christopher Wray, the FBI director, who was, of course, appointed by Donald Trump. And that is because Trump was given a limited hangout about what was really going on with the deep state. And you know this because Christopher Wray also held on to Hunter Biden's laptop and had FBI agent Brian Otten, you know, that guy that was writing for the Gospel Coalition, was on Davenant Institute's board of directors. Yeah, that guy. Well, he helped to cover up Hunter Biden's laptop until things got too hot in the kitchen. And Biden started talking about staying in the presidential race. And then we were treated to a limited hangout. And Hunter Biden pursued a career in slot painting that made him millions. I mean, almost as much money as Hunter made from Ukraine. And from his dealings with China, too, yeah. So nothing happened to Hunter. Heck, he's telling Congress to go pound sand. Now, of course, if you did any of this, you'd be thrown into jail and treated like the scum of the earth. But with the elite class of American transformationists, those that are part of the priestly cult class, no, they won't have any retributions. It's kind of like the bishops, priests, cardinals, and popes of centuries ago. They will not suffer one bit of punishment for their sins. But you, oh sinner, in the confessional booth, you heretic, you're going to pay. And it may even cost you your life. And meanwhile, Hunter Biden begins his painting career. They're literally mocking you. Mocking all of us. Now, there is another form of limited hangout which is used quite often, and this is called a modified limited hangout. A modified limited hangout goes even further than the limited hangout by slightly changing the information disclosed. So in a modified limited hangout, they will give you a little bit of the information. And then they will also distort that information. Like how in the Epstein client lists, Trump's name was never there. But the leftist progressive media decided to run with the story in the last few days, barfing up another false story that had already been dismissed. As Breitbart reported on January 8th, 2024, quote, media outlets buried the revelation that an accuser of the late disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein had retracted former President Donald Trump from her allegations. On Monday, Multiple media outlets ran reports of Trump having been named in the latest Epstein documents. But they failed to note in the lead of their articles that the accuser had actually retracted those allegations in 2019. Court documents made available on Monday included Epstein victim Sarah Ransom's 2016 emails to the New York Post, suggesting that she had Epstein-related sex tapes involving half a dozen prominent people, including Trump, Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, and Sir Richard Branson. Now, Ransom, however, could not provide the tapes when asked, and no such footage has ever been recovered. Then, in 2019, Ransom retracted her claims, according to The New Yorker, which reported that Ransom admitting to having, quote, invented the tapes to draw attention to Epstein's behavior and to make him believe that she had evidence that would come out if he harmed me, end quote. Multiple media outlets, nonetheless, ran with the old and retracted news on this past Monday, burying the lead in their stories, which was that Ransom's claims had already been retracted years ago. We're talking 5 years ago, she retracted all of her claims about Trump. Quote, "These baseless accusations have been fully retracted because they are simply false and have no merit," end quote. That was Stephen Chung, Trump spokesman, and he said this in a Monday statement. A headline by Daily Mail read, quote, "Donald Trump named in latest Epstein documents. Sarah Ransom said he had sex with many girls in email, where she also claimed pedophile had tapes of the ex-president, Richard Branson, Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton," end quote. She retracted all her claims, telling Callahan she wanted to walk away from this, citing fears for her family, end quote. Daily Mail eventually acknowledges in its article 4 paragraphs down from the headline. Another headline by the New York Post read, quote, "Epstein accuser claims pedophile had sex tapes of Trump, Clinton, Prince Andrew, Richard Branson. New docs," end quote. Very importantly, Sarah Ransom has since said that that isn't true, that she invented the sex tapes because she was terrified of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell at the time. Ward explained in a Monday video on her Substack titled, "Ignore the salacious headlines about Clinton and Trump." Now, did you catch that? In the last part of the article, she has to throw Clinton's name in as well next to Trump, saying that the accusations aren't true. And this is an attempt in the modified limited hangout to absolve Clinton of guilt, even though all evidence currently points to the contrary. Plus, that painting of Bill Clinton in a dress that was hanging in Epstein's place. Now, while this means that these monsters will likely be able to go on living their lives as if they are caught in a virtual Groundhog Day of Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, they will also not be talking about what this whole bit of nonsense was all about, which includes the Clintons, billionaire tech lords, members of the royal family, and Lady Rothschild. Because all of those people were involved in one way or another, with the transitioning of our nation from a constitutional republic to an autocratic, technocratic, authoritarian algocracy. And we're all involved, in one way or another, of transitioning us from free market capitalism into a form of stakeholder distributism. You might want to go back and listen to who was saying stakeholder, stakeholder, stakeholder about a year ago. And that this is the main thing that Lady Rothschild has been all about in her dealings with the royal family, the prime ministers and presidents, the Pope, and Jeffrey Epstein over the past 15 years or so, preparing everyone for a transition, a great reset. And all of those that have acknowledged or are involved in this evil transition better not speak up. That is why you have tons and tons of video and pictures of presidents, celebrities, royal family members, tech lords, and leaders of the financial institutions, and maybe even some of those in the judiciary as well. Because if you keep your mouth shut, things will be good for you on the other side of the Great Reset. But if you talk, And if you push back, things might not be so good for you. So everyone has to be on board for this transition, kind of like the famous Goethe statement. You know, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe from the 18th century, the Hermetic Gnostic member of the Freemasons, joining the Lodge Amalia in Weimar in 1780. You know, Goethe. He was also attracted to the Bavarian Illuminati, the secret society founded on May 1st, 1776. Yes, that Goethe. That Goethe who wrote the phrase that the World Economic Forum always has prominently displayed. You know, the statement that from Goethe that states, quote, "Until one is committed, there is hesitancy. The chance to draw back. Always ineffective. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now." End quote. And of course, Goethe, the Hermetic, is talking about the alchemical process. They need everyone who is in on this evil, cultic, destructive Malthusian reset to be all in. They need everyone who is in on this conspiracy to be committed and protected. So you might notice when public opinion starts getting hot about what is going on around us and about who is doing this to us. The World Economic Forum, the United Nations, NATO, the deep state establishment, that all of a sudden you might get a limited hangout. The Epstein client lists, UFOs, maybe a quick appearance and then a disappearance of Ray Epps, or a little bit about how they suppressed your voice on social media while they continue to shadow ban you on social media. Because that is how things work in the fake technocratic world. Because what you are given is a fake version of the First Amendment. As if your voice and your rights are being protected. As if Lady Justice is blind. And when you notice that Lady Justice is being raped by a Hermetic Gnostic technocratic cult, they throw you a bone. A limited hangout. So, how can we turn the tide on this? How can we make sure that we ensure that justice is done and that we head in the right direction again? Well, first, when a story like this breaks, contact your congressman. Contact your senator. Make your voice heard and do not back down. Make sure that the information is acted upon, and acted upon quickly. Demand it, especially from the do-nothing place-holding controlled opposition, known as the Republicans. And so when the Republican congressman or lawmaker, or candidate for president, comes on your show to complain and say how bad this Jeffrey Epstein thing is, say to them, okay, so what are you going to do about it? And when are you going to do something about it? Because if you don't get into action, we might primary you. I mean, what Jeffrey Epstein did is not any worse than what Asa Hutchinson, Chris Christie, and Nikki Haley say that they want to keep legal for little kids by allowing for them to have their genitals mutilated and their hormones changed. I mean, you can get therapy and prayer for a night with a member of the royal family, but a massive operation that destroys your body is somewhat irreversible. But we need to be clear that we want action, and we want it now. Because we can see the tentacles of this manipulative, sick, twisted cult all over our great nation. And it is time that we, the people, take back our nation. We must win. I'm Michael O'Fallon, and this has been Public Occurrences, both foreign and domestic.